there's an incredibly serious bill being debated and voted on in the House of Commons tomorrow. It's the assisted dying bill. I'm going to be completely upfront and say that I'm vehemently opposed to it, but obviously everybody else will have to make their own decision. Anyway, joined now by Michelle Anna Moffatt, who's campaigning against assisted dying. So, Michelle, first of all, why are you so concerned about this bill?
So I think that the thing is, for me personally, I had a spinal cord injury, and I'd actually joined Dignitas just a few years ago because I felt that I had nothing to offer in life any longer. And so I totally understand why people feel that they maybe can't go on any longer. Assisted suicide, though, I do not believe to be the answer. And I know that this bill currently is being proposed just for those who are terminally ill. But, you know, I don't believe it's even necessary if we have good, effective palliative care. Life has value and people are worth, you know, living. And I think we can all agree, no matter what side people fall on, that we don't want suffering. We don't want people to suffer with any condition at the end of their life. But that's when good, effective palliative care can come into play. I worked as an intensive care nurse and saw many people dying, and when that's managed well...
Can it always be managed? Because you hear people go, well, there was nothing they could do with palliative because she was in pain or he was in pain the whole time. And has it got to a level where they can do something?
So the thing is, within the UK, there's actually no upper limit in regards to pain medications that doctors can prescribe. I totally understand it must be heartbreaking for people watching loved ones suffering at the end of life. But really, that's why we need to improve upon palliative care.
But they sort of do it in the by the back door, don't they? Because they say things like make them comfortable, which means push them over the edge with the morphine, isn't it? Doesn't it? That's sort of code, isn't it?
Well,
make them comfortable.
So there's something called the doctrine of double effect in law that actually covers doctors that as long as the intention is not to bring death, if the intention is for doctors to alleviate pain, it's understood that potentially a secondary effect of that is that it may stop breathing, but that's not the intention to stop the breathing. So
it's a loophole sort of thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest with you. I mean, my mother died of lung cancer, which I've mentioned a number of times during this debate. Look, my view remains, I mean, obviously we were talking to her up until the day before she died, simply because that is the nature of cancer, isn't it? But from her perspective, I mean, she was... when she was in pain, she was prescribed medication, and that knocked her out. And whilst that was very distressing, she wasn't in any pain. And ultimately, I imagine the amount of medication they gave her would have meant that she wouldn't have lived for 5 years afterwards. But that doesn't matter if you're on the last day of your life. So I just think the system at the moment works perfectly fine. But here's my other question to you. Do you feel, and I'm just going to come completely out with this, that the minute that we have the right to die for terminally ill people, that suddenly disabled people become less valuable in society?
Absolutely. I think that when we look at countries like Canada, we look at Australia, we look at Oregon, even in America, when there have initially been safeguards, they gradually are widened, they're loosened, and we hear about this slippery slope, and it's really just a dive off a cliff, where we now hear about people with anorexia, with depression. And
I heard about a girl, I think it was in Holland or Belgium, and she actually changed her mind. But if she hadn't have, she would have done it. And then, like yourself, you changed your mind, didn't you? Because obviously you didn't have it. But every country it's happening where they say it's only for terminal. The doors open and it starts spreading to other things and ends with an 18-year-old girl with anorexia.
And when you start to call... we should be ending the suffering for people, not ending their life. When you start to call ending somebody's life and taking life away care, where do you draw that line? Are you then saying that some people don't deserve care? And then this is why we have this slippery slope. And we also, I think something that's very important, if we look at the medical research that's out there, assisted suicide cannot guarantee that it's quick or that it's painless. In Canada in 2018, over 50% of people who opted for assisted suicide, they ended up with doctors having to step in and convert to euthanasia because people were still alive after several hours.
I have to say one thing, Michelle Anna, people don't understand how difficult it is to kill somebody if you want no blood involved, right? So, you know, when you're talking about America, you know, the death penalty, it is incredibly difficult to administer because the body will fight back. And so this idea that you can take a pill or have one injection and that will kill you is simply for the birds. And it just worries me about how these things can end up just complicated. But one thing people who are watching on TV are seeing on their screens, and you and I are seeing, but perhaps obviously people listening are not, that there's loads of adverts in favour of assisted dying.
There's even on the tube.
And the Samaritans have put posters over it
in London,
just to ensure that it doesn't encourage people to commit suicide. I think, by the way, that tube station is Westminster. It's the bit where if you get off the Jubilee line, there's actually a private entrance to the Palace of Westminster.
Oh, maybe it's for the government.
So it is presumably aimed at MPs.
So the government sees it.
But still, I think it is irresponsible.
It's absolutely irresponsible, and I think we really need to be supporting people. I think today I saw in the Telegraph, Kim Leadbeater had actually said she's proposed this bill, and she actually said that, you know, the fear of being a burden is a legitimate reason for dying. You know, where is the dignity and where is the respect towards people to tell them that the fear of being a burden is a legitimate reason to die? You know, it's a terrible bill.
So what happened to you? I mean, and how come you changed your mind? What happened there? What was the first thing? How did you end up in the wheelchair then?
So basically, I had a kind of freak accident. I bent over, prolapsed cyst in my back, ended up paralysed from the waist down. I was 2 years in and I was not coping. I was so depressed.
Sorry, I don't understand that. You bent over.
A slip disc can paralyse you if it hits the nerve. If it just
went into my spinal cord.
People don't realise it. Yeah.
So you bent down to pick something. What did you pick up?
A pen.
Oh my God!
But always bend at the knees, really, isn't it?
So
it was a freak accident that was just something so simple. That
you're a fitness fanatic as well at the time.
So
when we joke about health and safety, people saying make sure you bend at the knees.
It's true.
I mean, you are somebody who's been paralysed from the waist down by bending over to pick up a pen. I'm stunned by that. I can't believe it.
Did you know it had happened? Did you think did you realise what had happened when you did it?
No. And as the week went on, I started to fall more and more. I went into hospital. I had surgery. I then had complications, and then landed.
So was it the complications, the operation that actually paralysed you? Or?
No, it was it. It kind of just
happened.
A bit more permanent. It was just a whole combination of different factors.
And so obviously you got really depressed and had mental issues about it.
And I felt that, you know, I can't be the mother that I was to my children. I'm not going to be a good wife to my husband. You know, everybody, I felt like such a burden and thought I would be doing everyone a favour. And I actually said to my husband, I've joined Dignitas and I want to go to Switzerland. Will you come with me? And I genuinely was excited. I thought he would be grateful for me wanting to do this. And he said, how can you do this to us? And I was shocked. My headspace was in such a bad place. I genuinely thought he would be happy. And that night, he was so angry. I felt I had no value. And I mean, I have a pretty strong faith. And that night I prayed and I was like, if I've not to do this, God, please give me a sign. And the next morning, my GP phones me. Some people may say it's a coincidence. Some may say it's an answer to prayer. But she phones me and said, I don't know why I'm phoning you, but I feel like I need to know, are you okay? She didn't know I was so depressed. And I burst out crying and told her, you know.
And how long were you, like a couple of days away from going to how far away were you?
Basically, I was about to book flights. I had put money by and I was ready to go. I had already joined, and it was I had been thinking of it for a few months and had made the final decision. That's what I was doing.
You said you thought you had no value, but your husband and your kids would have been there saying, "What are you doing this for?" So obviously you had value, but you were in a sort of mental space.
I just didn't. I couldn't see it because I had just restarted university to do my masters in nursing, and I loved my job. And I knew I couldn't do that job anymore.
Can I just say this to you? I've got a lot of friends of mine who are members of Parliament, and a lot of them, when they're travelling home, will listen to radio stations like this. I guarantee you there will be some members of Parliament listening right now. I'll tell you what I'd love to do, just give you the floor and say to you, what is the message that you want to send to them, and just take it away and say whatever it is that you want to say, because it's such an important bill and you're so knowledgeable about it that I just think it's worth dedicating the time for you to do that. So please go ahead.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I absolutely understand why everyone wants to end suffering for people, and I understand why people are taking this bill very seriously. But what I would say is, you know, ending somebody's suffering does not mean ending that person's life prematurely. I actually lost my mother-in-law just this morning. She was at the end stages of dementia. Had very good palliative care, and her pain was managed, her anxiety, all her symptoms were so well managed, and that gave her dignity in her death. She had dignity in her life up until its natural end. I wanted to end my life early. I thought I had nothing to offer. And actually last month, I just came home from having canoed the Zambezi over in Africa with 2 other paraplegic friends. We just set a world record. We did some charity work for a community over there. 2 years ago, I almost ended my life because I thought I had nothing to offer. I understand people feeling such distress, but what we need for terminal illnesses, we need people to have great palliative care. We have to have a mandate for palliative care to ensure that people are not suffering with their conditions. What we also need to have for people with kind of long-term degenerative conditions, or people like myself who are maybe in pain every day with chronic conditions, good psychological support, emotional support, spiritual support, you know, all of these things need to be addressed. I am proof that, you know, you can literally feel like life is over and genuinely want to die. And when you have that support, the law protected me against myself. I am grateful that it is illegal in the UK, and it was illegal at the time that I was going through this.
But you could still go to Dignitas at that time.
I could still go to Dignitas at that point. It obviously took a long time for me to put so much money aside. It's thousands of pounds for all of that to go through. Also, there's a lot of paperwork you need. There's a lot that needs done. But had it been available on the NHS, I probably would not be sitting here right now. My children would be without their mother. My husband...
How old are they now?
So my eldest daughter is 21. I've got a son at 19, a daughter at 15, and then another son at 13.
You've seen them all growing up. So after this call, the epiphany call from the doctor, you couldn't have been immediately happy. How long did it take? Did it take a couple of months?
No, I mean, and it would be a lie to say I was. And actually, my doctor suggested I speak to a charity called Spinal Injury Scotland. I agreed to speak to them just to humour her, because I was like, well, I need to get my medical notes from you so that I can go to Dignitas. So I agreed to speak to the charity. That was the start of me getting some psychological support, help, meeting other people
with the same position. Yeah,
who had the same condition. And now I volunteer for the charity, and I actually go and work as a peer support volunteer to help other people going through, you know, those emotions I did.
How do you answer those people who say, well, we're not talking about the spinal injury people? Andre and Ash have sat there for weeks and weeks and weeks saying that this is the thin end of the wedge. But what if it wasn't the thin end of the wedge? What if it is just people who are terminally ill?
Well, if it's just people who are terminally ill, what we need to do is manage their condition. The thing is, when you look at assisted suicide, if you actually look at the way that it's done in the medical research, the drugs that are given, it's not necessarily quick. In Oregon, there are people reported it's taken 5 days to die. Now, they have taken these oral drugs to end their own lives, and you know, then a lot of the time they end up dying with pulmonary edema
or liver failure or something terrible.
Yeah. Something really agonising.
Also, doctors can be wrong when they say you're terminal. I heard on Ian Collins last week, by the way, 1 p.m. every day on talkTV, but someone called and said his mother was only given a few months. They said he was too old to operate, and she's got about 3 months. So they went to the trust, the neighbouring trust, and they said, no, we'll have a go, we'll operate. Anyway, she lived another 8 years, and she was cancer-free. She died of natural causes.
But there is the other James Whale situation, which is ironic because I think James Whale is in favour of assisted dying. But What's happened to him is this. When you get sat down and told you're terminally ill with cancer, right, they don't tell you that they expect a new treatment to be approved next week. They will only tell you what your life expectancy would be with the drugs they can prescribe to you today, which is why you hear people all the time going, I was given 3 weeks to live 6 years ago. Because what's happened is the week after, suddenly a new drug has come on board. So it's perfectly possible that somebody diagnosed with cancer tomorrow who is given 6 months to live may end up dying of natural causes 20 years later.
Yeah.
And forget that being an unusual situation because of the rate of technology, the rate of advancements in technology, medical technology. It's perfectly possible. It happens all the time.
Like I said, the trust wouldn't operate. They said she's too old, and this other trust said no, we'll have a go. And so you know, it all depends on. You always get a second opinion as well.
Well, that's it. And I think the thing is as well, for people, even if they could guarantee that these safeguards will never move, which I don't believe that is something they can guarantee, because what's to say if you've got less than 6 months, then you deserve to do this. But if you've got 7 months, you don't. This is where people get into. But regardless,
well, of course, the other point is,
let's give people a quality of life until the end of their life. Let's keep them pain-free. Let's manage the symptoms that they have with each of their conditions, rather than just ending their life in a way that could potentially be more painful and more suffering than the illness itself.
Plus, they changed the goalposts. I mean, when they got rid of hanging, they said, don't worry, people will get life and they'll never get out of prison. And that, of course, was watered down. You get people walking within 15 years or less now.
Yeah.
From murder charges.
Well, I have to say, look, I mean, I've never spoken to somebody who wanted to go through assisted dying. And all I can say to anybody considering voting on this bill tomorrow, the members of Parliament that are watching and listening, I mean, Michelle, Anna, all we need is just for people to look at you and to say there is a mother who is there for her children, not with the physical capacity she would like to, but she's there nonetheless. This is somebody who may well, in the future, if this bill passes, may well have been dead long before.
They could cure her as well. Even, you know, in the future, they may be able to join up with stem cells to spinal cord. You never know.
Yeah. Well, that's it. They're working in these things just now, and regardless, like, I want to live my life until it's natural end and live the best life I can until I'm not here any longer.
And how is life? Is it better? That, you know, is it amazing?
Life's amazing, and honestly, now I can honestly say I would not change a thing. And if somebody said to me, you can have your old life back tomorrow, I think I've become a better person, a more caring person, a more understanding person for what I've been through now, and I wouldn't change it. And my life has value. I might be in pain for the rest of my life, but regardless, it's still worth living, and every life has got value.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, Michelle Anna Moffatt, you are a credit to
an inspiration.
to the campaign. Thank you so much for coming on. Just a reminder to anyone that Samaritan's phone number is 116123. So if you are depressed or feeling suicidal, I mean, first of all, please listen to Mrs. Moffatt, who I think is an inspiration to us all. But also, if you want to talk directly to someone, 116123 is the number to call.